My dad kicked me out when I was just 13, all to keep his new pregnant wife happy. Now that she's wrecked his life, he wants me back. But when I finally spoke up, what I said left him absolutely stunned. This all began in 2020, right when the lockdowns hit hard. I was 13 then, living in Houston, and things between me and my stepmom Laura were actually pretty decent. To be honest, I thought of her as another mom. She'd been in my life for quite a while, and we'd always gotten along well. She treated me kindly, and I genuinely enjoyed being around her. I never got the feeling that she saw me any differently than she would her own child. So when she told us she was pregnant, I was genuinely happy for her. At that point, my real mom, Rachel, who's a surgeon, was working nonstop because of everything going on with the pandemic. Her schedule was totally packed, so I stayed with my dad, David, and Laura during the lockdown. It was only meant to be temporary, but with everything that was happening, that short stay stretched into something much longer than anyone expected. At first, everything felt normal like everyone else. We were just trying to survive quarantine life. We'd watch movies, hang out together, typical stuff. I actually thought it was nice spending more time with them, especially since Laura was expecting. I figured I'd get to be part of this new chapter, maybe help with the baby, and be an awesome big sister. But yeah, that didn't happen. Things started changing when she was about 4 months along. At first, it was just little things. She'd get snippy over nothing, and I just assumed she was having a tough day. I mean, she was pregnant, cooped up inside, and stressed like everyone else. I try not to take it personally. I figured it was no big deal, but it didn't stop there. It actually got way worse. Suddenly, it felt like every single thing I did annoyed her. And the thing is, I'm not some messy, out-of-control kid. I keep things tidy, follow the house rules, and I helped out around the house like I was supposed to. But none of it mattered to her. She'd walk into a room, see me sitting quietly, and let out this dramatic sigh like just existing around her was unbearable. It was like she couldn't stand me anymore, and I had no idea what I'd done to deserve it. I started staying in my room most of the time, not because I wanted to isolate, but because I was trying not to make anything worse. I'd come out to grab food or do my chores, but other than that, I tried to stay invisible. Even then, she'd still snap. One day, she stormed into my room, absolutely losing it, yelling that the smell and there was making her nauseous. I looked around, totally confused. The only thing that could have possibly been smelly was a half-eaten bag of chips on my desk. That was it. Before I could explain, she just broke down, full-on sobbing, like I'd done something horrible. My dad came running in, wrapping his arms around her, telling her it was all okay, trying to calm her down. Meanwhile, I was just standing there like, what the hell just happened? They kept saying it was the pregnancy hormones, that she was more emotional than usual. But to me, it didn't feel like that. It felt like she just plain hated me, and no one wanted to say it out loud. And it wasn't just that one day. Everything I did seemed to trigger her. I could be sitting quietly, reading or watching something on my phone, and she'd suddenly get mad that I wasn't helping more, even if I'd already finished every chore. Or I'd be in the kitchen, cleaning up, and she'd barge in and complain that I was taking too long, even if I was literally mid-scrub. The worst part? My dad never once stood up for me. Whenever she got upset, he just focused on calming her down and telling me to be patient, that she was going through a lot, but he never once stopped to ask me how I was holding up. It was like I didn't count anymore. I was just there in the way, and slowly, I started feeling like a stranger in my own home. I couldn't even sit in the same room as them without feeling like I was walking on glass. I tried to talk to my dad about it, tried asking him why she was suddenly acting like I was a burden, but he always brushed it off. He'd say stuff like, she's just overwhelmed, or she doesn't mean it. But over time, it stopped feeling like she didn't mean it. It started to feel very real. I didn't want to leave my room at all anymore. My mental health took a nosedive. I started believing that I was the problem, like I wasn't wanted. I'd lie awake at night, terrified that one day my dad was going to tell me to pack up and leave. I was so anxious all the time that my hair literally started falling out. I remember sitting there, staring at strands of hair in my hands, completely stunned, wondering how things had spiraled so badly. I tried everything I could think of to fix it. I did more chores, kept to myself even more, and did whatever I could to stay useful and out of the way. I cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, vacuumed, whatever needed doing, I did it, but nothing ever seemed to be enough. Laura always found something to criticize. One day, it was how I folded the towels. The next, it was a dirty cup in the sink that had been there for all of 5 minutes. There was always something wrong. And it wasn't just the chores, it was the constant tension. The house felt heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next explosion. I couldn't relax. I couldn't just exist like a normal kid in my own home. Every time I had to step out of my room, my stomach twisted. Even when I tried to drown it all out with headphones, it barely made a difference. The pressure was unbearable. I kept pretending it wasn't getting to me, but deep down, I was falling apart. I just wanted to be back at my mom's place. But that wasn't an option with the pandemic in full swing and her working insane hours. I was stuck. Every day felt like tiptoeing through a minefield, never sure when Laura would explode again or when my dad would finally tell me to get out. The more it happened, the clearer it became. Laura didn't want me there. That thought lodged itself in my head and wouldn't let go. And it terrified me. I mean, I was 13. If they kicked me out, where would I even go? I didn't know the answer, but one thing was obvious. Things were only getting worse. Then one day, just a regular, boring day like the rest, I was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through my phone, killing time. I remember it so vividly because I wasn't doing anything wrong, nothing. I wasn't making noise, wasn't being messy. I was just sitting there waiting for my cereal to get soggy. I like it that way, always have. Weird, maybe, but it's just my thing. Laura walked in. She didn't say a word at first, just stood there, scanning the kitchen like she was trying to sniff out something to criticize. But there was nothing. I had cleaned earlier that morning, dishes done, counters wiped, everything neat and in its place. Still, she exhaled this exaggerated, irritated breath, like even the sight of me quietly existing ruined her day. That she started cleaning, loudly, harshly, clanging dishes around and scrubbing the counter like she was trying to wear a hole through it. The whole time, she muttered under her breath about how nobody cleans up after themselves and how the kitchen was always a mess. I sat there, staring into my bowl, doing everything I could not to react. I knew how it would go if I did, but then she did something that made my blood boil. She walked over, picked up my untouched bowl of cereal, and dumped the whole thing straight into the trash. No warning, no reason, just tossed it out like it meant nothing. I hadn't spilled, I hadn't made a mess, she just did it. To prove something, like she wanted me to feel small, like whatever I was doing didn't matter. I snapped. Every ounce of stress and hurt I'd bottled up over the past few months burst out all at once. I slammed my hands on the table and yelled, "What is your problem with me?" She froze, eyes wide, like she couldn't believe I spoke back. "Why do you hate me so much?" I shouted. "I haven't done anything to you, and all you ever do is treat me like garbage." She didn't answer. She just stood there, stunned, like it was the first time someone had dared to call her out. And then, right on cue, she burst into tears, full-on sobbing like I cursed her out in the worst way possible. Before I could say another word, David came rushing in from the living room like he always did the second she started crying. "What's going on?" he asked, but it wasn't a real question. He didn't want an explanation. Laura immediately launched into her usual act, crying even harder and saying I was making her uncomfortable, that I was stressing her out, and that she couldn't take it anymore. I looked at my dad, hoping he'd at least hear me out, but he didn't even look at me. Instead, he turned to me and asked, "What did you do?" Like he'd already made up his mind, like I had to be the bad guy. I just stared at him, totally stunned, and then Laura said it. "I don't want her near my baby," she cried. "This stress isn't good for me, and it's definitely not good for the baby. She needs to go." My dad didn't argue. He didn't ask questions. He just walked me to my room like I was being punished for something. He shut the door behind us and gave me this look like he was about to drop a truth bomb. My heart was pounding because deep down, I knew what was coming. "You must be doing something to Laura," he said. "Nobody just hates a kid for no reason. You need to stop upsetting her, or you're going to have to leave. I can't have her this stressed while she's pregnant. It's not good for her, and it's not good for the baby." It felt like the floor vanished under me. I couldn't even respond. My own dad had picked her side completely. He didn't even care what was actually going on. To him, I wasn't his daughter anymore. I was just a problem that needed to go away. I just stood there, staring at him, completely lost for words. My mind was racing, but everything felt jumbled, like nothing could settle into place. All I could feel was this unbearable pressure in my chest, like I couldn't breathe. I had no idea what else to do, so I just gave a quiet nod, grabbed a bag, and started tossing in some clothes. Honestly, I didn't want to stay there anymore. Not after everything that had gone down. I went back to my room, locked the door behind me, and made a post on social media, asking if anyone had a place I could crash. I laid it all out, no sugarcoating. I didn't care if people thought I was being dramatic. I just needed a way out. My phone started buzzing nonstop almost immediately, but I didn't even look. I stuffed more clothes into my backpack and slipped out the window. It wasn't a big deal. My room was on the ground floor, and I'd done it before. I just needed to get away from that house. At first, I had no destination, just a need to escape. I figured I could ask a friend if I could stay for a bit. I walked for about half an hour before I even remembered to turn my phone back on. As soon as it powered up, messages started flooding in. My dad, Laura, comments on my post. I didn't read any of them. I shut it right back off and kept walking. I made it to my friend's house, and thankfully her parents didn't hesitate to let me stay. I kept the details vague, just said home life was rough and I needed somewhere safe. They didn't push for answers, which I was grateful for. I used my friend's phone to text my mom and tell her what happened. She couldn't call me right then. She was in the middle of surgery, but she said she'd asked my Aunt Maggie to come get me the next day. That was enough for now. I just needed to be somewhere quiet. When I finally fell asleep that night, all I could think about was what my dad had said. No one hates a kid for no reason. That one line kept looping in my mind, and with every replay, my anger just kept growing. How could he even believe that? How could he think I must have done something to deserve it? I'd gone out of my way to stay invisible around Laura, to keep the house clean, to make things smooth, and this was my reward. I didn't know what my next move would be, but one thing was clear: I wasn't going back there, not after that. The next morning, I woke up at my friend's place feeling kind of hollow. Everything that happened still felt surreal, like I knew I wasn't going back to my dad's house, but the reality of it hadn't really hit me yet. Her parents were kind. They didn't pry or make things weird. They gave me breakfast and let me sit quietly in the living room. I wasn't ready to talk, wasn't sure what to even say. I just felt emotionally wiped out, like there was nothing left in the tank. Around noon, Aunt Maggie showed up. She gave me that look adults give when they know something's wrong but don't want to make it worse. We didn't talk much at first. She just helped gather my things and drove me back to her place. Honestly, I was relieved. I've always felt safe with Maggie. She's that kind of aunt who just gets it. No judgment, no lectures, just calm. As we pulled up to her house, I turned my phone back on, which turned out to be a huge mistake. My screen exploded with calls and messages, mostly from my dad. He must have tried reaching me at least 20 times the night before. There were texts too. Some from him, some from Laura, and a bunch from family members, probably after he posted something about me leaving. I didn't dive into them right away. It was too much. I needed time. I shot my mom a quick message to let her know I was all right, though I figured she already knew from talking to Maggie. She replied almost instantly, saying she was relieved and that we'd talk soon once she had a break from the hospital. I knew my dad was probably freaking out by now, especially after realizing I'd actually left and wasn't picking up his calls. But honestly, I didn't care. He made it clear how he felt the night before. What did he think would happen? That I'd stay and keep pretending everything was fine? I wasn't ready to hear him try to spin it, to act like I misunderstood or make it seem like I was the problem. But as I sat on Maggie's couch, one thought kept creeping in. The fallout from all of this: I knew my grandparents, his parents, weren't going to stay quiet once they found out. They'd always been protective of me, especially since I didn't live with my dad full time. I couldn't even imagine what they'd say once they heard the whole story. Eventually, curiosity won out, and I started scrolling through the messages. One of the first was a long one from my dad. He apologized for how things played out, but kept defending Laura, saying she was just overwhelmed from the pregnancy and that I needed to try harder to be understanding. The whole message just sounded like he was trying to explain it all away, like somehow it was my job to go back, smooth things over, and make everyone happy again. Then came Laura's message, and honestly, it annoyed me even more, short, cold, and completely missing the point. No apology, no acknowledgement of how she treated me. Just a quick "hope you're safe" and a passive-aggressive jab about the stress I'd caused the family by leaving. That one really got under my skin. Like, she actually had the nerve to act like I was the problem. And right after that, the family messages started rolling in. My grandparents? They were livid. They didn't even bother with a text. They went straight to calling my dad out publicly, right there on Facebook, asking him how things had gotten so bad that I felt like I had no choice but to run away. I don't think he saw that coming. His original post about me being missing was clearly meant to get sympathy, but it completely backfired. People weren't falling for it. They were asking the real questions, like why his own daughter would feel like she had to escape her own home. The comments piled up, and from the way his later messages read, I could tell he was spiraling. He didn't have a good answer for anyone, and it was clear he hadn't told the full story. My grandparents didn't even know Laura had been pushing me out, or that my dad said what he did to me. They just thought I disappeared. So once they found out the truth, things exploded. Apparently, David and Laura started showing up at family friend houses, asking if anyone had seen me. They even texted people we barely talked to, trying to get leads. It was almost embarrassing, like now, that everyone knew they were scrambling to make themselves look like the victims. But I knew better. They weren't upset because I was gone. They were upset because it wasn't a secret anymore. All their dirty laundry was out in the open. The guilt trips didn't work on me this time. Reading through those messages didn't just make me mad. It made something click. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done. There was no going back from this. You don't forget words like that, and you don't unfeel being unwanted. Laura didn't want me there, and my dad made it clear he was on her side. I tried so hard, staying out of the way, helping around the house, just doing whatever I could to keep the peace. But it had never been enough, and I finally accepted it. They didn't want me, and I wasn't going to beg them to. Aunt Maggie could tell I wasn't in a good headspace that day, but she didn't push me to talk. She just gave me space. Later that evening, she came into the room and gently asked if I wanted to stay with her for a while. I didn't even hesitate. Of course I did. Going back to my dad's house wasn't an option, and I didn't want to bounce from couch to couch either. Maggie's place felt safe. It was my little island away from a storm. The rest of the day was kind of a blur. I mostly sat on the couch, scrolling through the comments under my dad's post, watching it all unfold. A few people tried defending him, saying I was probably just a rebellious teen or blaming the stress from the pandemic. But most people weren't buying it. They were asking the same thing I'd been wondering for months. What makes a 13-year-old feel like she has to pack up and leave? Even distant relatives were weighing in, saying how disappointed they were in my dad. As much as I appreciated the support, it didn't take the sting away. All the public shaming in the world didn't change the fact that my dad had picked Laura over me. He showed me exactly where I stood, and it wasn't beside him. I try not to dwell on it, but it kept creeping back in. Every time I looked at my phone, the ache came right back with it. That night, before bed, I finally sent him a message. Nothing dramatic, just enough to let him know I was safe and that I wouldn't be coming home. I told him I'd be staying with Aunt Maggie and didn't want to talk until I was ready. He replied almost immediately, but I didn't read it. I'd had enough. Lying there, staring up at the ceiling, it really hit me. Things had changed for good. Not just with my dad, not just with Laura, but with how I saw it all. And for the first time in a while, I felt okay about that. After a few days at Maggie's, things started to settle into a rhythm. Still weird, but calmer. I was still getting flooded with messages from my dad, but I stopped reading them. I already knew the script. More, we need to talk, and Laura's just under pressure, but never once an actual apology. It was always about her, how I needed to be more understanding. Even now, after everything, he was still choosing her. Eventually, I just blocked both of them. I was done being dragged into their drama. It wasn't on me to fix this, and I wasn't going to let them make me feel like I had to. Aunt Maggie was honestly the only reason I stayed sane through all of it. She never pressured me to talk unless I wanted to. She just made sure I had a safe space where I could breathe and figure things out at my own pace. She even fixed up her guest room like it was mine, stocked it with my favorite blankets and snacks, so I'd feel comfortable. It felt good having someone who actually cared about how I was doing. Without any hidden motives, one afternoon, while we were sitting at the kitchen table, Maggie finally asked, "Do you think you'll ever talk to your dad again?" She didn't push. It was more like she was giving me an opening to talk if I wanted. I didn't answer right away because honestly, I didn't know what to say. A part of me wanted to believe my dad could make it right somehow, like he could undo the damage. But the other part, the part that had heard him say those awful things, didn't think there was a way back. How do you come back from something like that? I don't know. I finally told her I want to talk to him, but I don't think I can forgive him. Not after what he said. Maggie nodded. That's fair. You don't have to decide anything right now. Just take your time. And that was exactly what I needed to hear. I didn't need a solution. I needed time and space. Meanwhile, my grandparents were still furious with my dad. I never even had to explain what happened. They'd already figured it out from his social media posts and a few conversations with other relatives. They'd stopped talking to him altogether, which honestly shocked me. I expected them to be upset, but not to cut him off completely. I guess it showed me I wasn't the only one who saw him for who he really was. Every few days, my grandma would call just to check in. She never brought up my dad, and I appreciated that. She mostly asked how I was doing, how things were going at Maggie's, and if I needed anything. I think she was trying to make up for how bad things had gotten. Even though it wasn't her fault, it was comforting to know at least someone in the family still had my back. Life at Maggie's was so much calmer than it had ever been at my dad's. No tension, no walking on eggshells. I could finally breathe. My days were filled with online school. Thanks, pandemic. and helping Maggie around the house. It wasn't exactly exciting, but after everything, that quiet was exactly what I needed. Still, even with the support from Maggie and my grandparents, I felt this lingering emptiness. I couldn't stop thinking about my half-brother. I hadn't even met him yet, and part of me worried that by staying away from my dad and Laura, I'd never get the chance. He had nothing to do with any of this, and it didn't feel fair that I might miss out on being a sister to him. I tried not to dwell on it, but it was hard. Every time I thought about the future, I wondered if he'd be a part of it. But even so, I knew going back wasn't an option, not even just to see him. I wasn't ready to face them. Maybe I never would be. Then one night, while I was scrolling on my phone, I got a notification, another post from my dad. It was one of those long, dramatic messages about family and regret. He didn't name me, but it was clearly directed at me. He talked about wanting to make things right and bring the family back together. Reading it made my blood boil. He acted like a social media post counted as an apology, like fishing for sympathy online somehow, made everything okay. But it didn't. If he actually cared, he'd have picked up the phone, called Maggie, written a letter. Anything real, not this vague, guilt-trippy nonsense. I shut my phone and tossed it onto the bed. I wasn't going to get sucked back into his drama. Not this time. The next morning, I told Maggie about the post. She just shook her head and said, "That sounds like your dad. He doesn't know how to just admit he was wrong." And that right there, that was the whole problem. He didn't want to own what he'd done. He just wanted things to go back to how they were, like none of it had ever happened. But I wasn't the same girl anymore. I wasn't going to play along just to make him feel better. After that, I made a decision. I unfollowed him on social media, blocked his number, and asked Maggie not to tell me anything about him unless it was urgent. I needed the space to move forward. And as long as he was still trying to pull me back in, I couldn't do that. But it wasn't easy. It was a lot harder than I thought it'd be. Cutting someone off, even when they've hurt you deeply, isn't as simple as just pressing a block button. There were times when I caught myself thinking about reaching out, moments where I missed how things used to be, but then I'd remember that night, those awful words, and I'd snap myself right back to reality. Keeping my distance wasn't easy, but it felt necessary. It felt like the only option that made sense anymore. Fast forward a couple of years. By then, I had managed to build a life that felt okay. I was keeping my head above water. Even with my own health issues constantly hovering in the background, I wasn't thriving exactly, but I had some stability, I had peace, I had people who cared, and most importantly, I had boundaries that kept me sane. Then, out of nowhere, my dad messaged me. After years of silence, nothing, not a word, he suddenly decided it was time to talk for a second. I actually wondered if maybe he'd grown. Maybe he was reaching out to apologize. Maybe he had done some soul searching and wanted to take real responsibility for the damage he caused. But no, this wasn't about making peace or owning up to anything. It was about his life crumbling and him scrambling for anyone who might still care enough to help clean up the mess. Turns out his wife, the same one who helped push me out of the family, had flipped the script on him. She started accusing him of being aggressive, violent, misogynistic, the whole list. And here's the kicker. It was all lies. She was pulling the same manipulative garbage she used on me years ago, only now he was the one under fire. When I read his message, I felt this strange wave of déjà vu. I could hear her voice in my head like it was yesterday, twisting reality, spinning stories, making herself the victim. I'd lived through it. I knew exactly how those games felt. But the big difference, back when she did it to me, he backed her up without question. He believed her. He defended her. Hell, he even got physical with me because of her, and I was the one tossed out like trash. Now the tables had turned. He was the one out of the house. He was the one being isolated and lied about. And suddenly I was supposed to feel sorry for him. From what I could gather, she'd poisoned their entire social circle against him. Friends, neighbors, gone. Legal trouble was starting to pile up too. Accusations were flying, and no one wanted to hear his side. She painted him as this horrible person. And now he was completely alone. But what really hit me was when he said he tried going to his parents, my grandparents, for help, and they shut the door in his face. These were the same people who had defended him no matter what, who used to overlook every mistake. But apparently, they'd had enough. They told him flat out that he wasn't welcome anymore. And a reason? Me. After everything that went down between us, they'd finally drawn the line. They told him if he ever wanted to be part of their lives again, he'd have to start by making things right with me. That was the condition. No fixing things with me, no fixing things with them. And that's why he reached out, not out of love, not because he missed me or regretted anything. He just needed me to open the door. so he could step back into the family. I actually laughed when I read that part. It was classic him. He still didn't get it. He hadn't changed. This wasn't about healing. It was about strategy, manipulation, survival. He wasn't looking to make amends because it was the right thing to do. He was doing it because I was now the one holding the key. And honestly, I wasn't even mad. I was over it, the silence, the distance. It had given me time to breathe, to process, to rebuild, not fully, but enough to know that I didn't need him in my life to be okay. So when he asked if we could talk, I didn't dance around it. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I just said no. That was it, just no. No explanation, no second chance, no open door. He wasn't going to use me as a stepping stone back into the family. Not after what he put me through, not now, not ever. Of course, he didn't take it well. He started spamming my phone with messages, trying every guilt tactic he could think of. I'm still your father. Family should stick together, as if that had ever meant a damn thing to him. When I was the one crying out for support, he kept begging, pretending we could work things out. But I wasn't biting. I knew the game. I didn't reply. I blocked his number and moved on. And weirdly enough, it wasn't hard. There was no big emotional tug, no hesitation, just peace, calm. I'd already mourned that relationship. I'd already done the work of letting go. He was part of my past, not my future. He made his choices. He chose to believe her lies. He chose to hurt me. He chose to cut me out when I needed him most. And now that she turned on him, he expected me to come running, to rescue him from the consequences of his own decisions. No, he can sit with the fallout just like I had to. And as for my grandparents, I respect what they did. They stood up for me when it mattered. They made him face what he tried so hard to ignore. That meant more to me than I could say. But as far as reconciling with him, that door's closed, and I'm the one who closed it. I've got no regrets about that. So yeah, he reached out, and I told him no, and it felt really, really good.